welcome to this anniversary interview series that we're doing over at Music Weeklies. And I'm here today with Michael Cryne, who is a British composer. He has a PhD in composition from Royal Holloway at the Uni of London. He is a graduate, is that what it's called, of the Panufnik Composer Scheme and the Leverhulme Young Composer Scheme. The first one with the London Symphony Orchestra and the second one with the London Philharmonic Orchestra. And he's also won the Scottish National Orchestra Composers Hub Scheme and thereby was performed by the Scottish National Orchestra, right? And is a graduate of the PRS or winner of the PRS Accelerate scheme.
Participant, I think.
Participant. Okay,
yeah,
good. That's good that you correct me.
I don't know.
And that's the official bio. That's it sounds very impressive, but I've also spent the morning listening to your music, and I have to say I really, really enjoy it.
Thank you. That's always nice.
Toyshop.
It's always nice to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm really glad you like that one. That was with the Riot Ensemble. How many years ago? Quite a few years ago now. It was it was a really personal project for me. Obviously, Celia is the name of my daughter, and I really wanted to write her like a set of pieces that were sort of just ideas that came to me, things about toys and things that I thought she might like, and it was quite sort of. I suppose the titles can feel a little bit strange, but there was always something sort of personal behind each of the pieces. So I'm really pleased you like that one. That's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It made me think of a ballet suite in a sense. So
great.
Very sort of cinematic feel, or I don't know, could sort of see the story unfold in the pieces.
Well, that's doubly lovely to hear, and I think one day I'd really love to do a ballet. That's always been a sort of long-term ambition of mine. I'd really like to have a go at that. So that's really nice to hear. Thank you.
Sounds
that's
fantastic.
Great.
So, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, other than what I just said?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's kind of everyone has these bios, and there's sort of these lists of things that we've won and schemes we've taken part in and people we've worked with, and it all sort of sounds like a sort of CV dump. But I've been focusing on composition for about mainly on composition now for sort of about 10 years. I sort of started off, I really wanted to be a composer when I was younger, and it's a hard old job to do, and I found myself working in the theatre kind of as a sort of more as a musical director. I can sort of play the piano and the keyboards after a fashion, and it sort of was good enough to sort of play for plays and things like that. And I wrote a fair bit of music for the theatre. I ended up writing quite a lot of music for the theatre, and then sort of decided I really, really wanted to write my own, music for concert, and so I sort of gave that a go and did that via the means of a doctorate. It's a great way to just get some music written. There's an external stimulus, there's a target, and in fact, actually, because I was looking at Music Weeklies and I was looking at what's it all about? What's the idea? And the idea is no one's really necessarily going to push you to write music. You've really got to sort of find why you want to do it from within. Unless there's a specific commission or a specific project you might be working towards. And I certainly feel that with music for the concert hall, certainly when you're starting off, there's not necessarily going to be what you might call demand for your stuff. You've almost got to find something that you want to do yourself and go with that. So the doctorate was a great framework to do that. I had a brilliant supervisor, Mark Bowden, his name is, and you should check his music out because it's absolutely beautiful. And I was also lucky enough to work with a lovely composer, wonderful composer, Helen Grime, who's just gone into the stratosphere. Her career's just doing amazingly well, and she was great as well. And they were both super lovely and really, really helpful to me. And so I look back on that time quite fondly. Really, it was a really a really developmental experience. It was great, and I was lucky enough to do at the same time. You reeled off that list, and I was like, oh yeah, I did that as well. That was quite cool.
Yeah, it's impressive. Absolutely.
I'm now living in Copenhagen. We moved 2 years ago. Yeah, I've been here for 2 years. We moved. My wife got a job offer that was kind of too good to turn down, and we sort of thought, should we give it a go? It was a bit one of those leap into the dark moments. Let's go and give it a go. And I love being here in Copenhagen. It's an amazing city. Before the thing, it was quite easy to get back. Just hop back to the UK. So I was sort of not quite dividing my time, but I was sort of here and back, between Copenhagen and London. And I've been here because obviously we all got locked down, and then we were sort of exclusively here for quite a long time, and that was kind of lovely because it's a great city to be in, especially in the summer. It's not so great in January.
Yeah, no.
But neither's Manchester, where I grew up, so swings and roundabouts, right?
Yeah, I was wondering about your accent.
Yeah, it's sort of Mancunian. I left Manchester when I was about 18, so I've sort of vaguely held on to it. And whenever I go back, I did an interview for Radio 3 when I was up there recording something, and I did a broadcast interview, and then I listened to it back, and I was like, that's not me. That's incredibly Mancunian. So when I go back, it really comes back out. So I do sound a little bit like one of the cast of Shameless sometimes when I go back. But yeah. So that's kind of where we're up to in life. I've got a little girl who's sort of having a whale of a time here. It's a great time to be a small person. It's a great place to be a small person. Not such a great time to be a small person because they're all sort of being told not to touch each other and disinfect your hands every 5 minutes and all the rest of it. But that's the new normal. So it is what it is.
Yeah. Can I ask, just out of personal curiosity, because I did a PhD, but in archaeology, so I had to write a 400-page thesis, and I was just wondering, what is it? A PhD in composition? Do you write a thesis, or do you actually just produce this huge work of musical piece?
It's a really good question. Archaeology. Fascinating. Okay, I know this is an interview for me, but we should talk about that another time because that's fascinating. People are so interesting. You meet some really interesting people. So the idea is you have, and this often happens with more practical subjects. Practical is the wrong word because it's composition. But the idea is that you write a sort of reflective commentary. It's nothing. In fact, it's publicly available. Should anybody want to read it, I will sort of. That makes me feel slightly nervous because it's I sort of please don't go and read it. It might be awful. Please don't go and check my homework. And so it's a sort of mini thesis. So you present this. I think it was 90 minutes of music, which is a heck of a lot if you write as many notes as I do. I write too many notes.
90 or 19? 90. Oh, geez, that's 2 symphonies worth.
Well, I didn't write some. Yeah, and it's not all got to be orchestral music, although they do advise that you write an orchestra, at least one full orchestral piece and try and get it recorded. That's depending on where you are, where you're studying. That's easier for some people than it is for others. Just depends where you study, what your resources are. So it's a mini thesis sort of commentary on what is it you're presenting us with, why have you done it, what are you up to, what's going on in your music, can you tell us the thinking behind your music, and sort of being presented with you're sort of sat across from 2 pretty esteemed colleagues when it comes to the viva. I mean, you've done it, right? So you know what a PhD viva is like. I was sick. I remember because I was sick as a dog on the day. I called my super. I was so poorly. Like I don't know what I got. It was like a horrendous flu or something, and I felt like I was going to die. I thought, great, I've got my PhD viva. One of these guys had come down from Wales, so I've got to do it. I've really got to do it today. So I made myself get on with it, and they were like the process. It's wrong to describe the process as lovely. It wasn't, because they do obviously, they grill you, but it was sort of simultaneously amazing and terrifying at the same time. It was like, I guess, almost like jumping out of an aeroplane with a parachute on. It's just wow. Yeah. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, you write a smaller commentary about the music you've written and try and explain what's going on.
Okay, right. So it's an academic way to write music, but still pretty free in terms of form and
and if you want. If you want to, and I've seen people write all sorts of music in their PhD. I think one thing I might, if anyone was considering, is it for me? Should I do it? I'd say go and talk to someone who you think you might like to supervise your PhD, and find someone who's sort of writing music that you're vaguely sort of interested in and think might be sympathetic to the way you write music. I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what a doctorate in composition is or can be. You can really make it into whatever you want. I mean, if you want to write sort of highly process driven, intellectual, for want of a better word. I don't really like that term. And I apologize for using it. But if that's the sort of music you want to write, and you have a schema and a framework for justifying every note, well, that's great. But that doesn't necessarily. I don't think that's reflective of what's going on among the wider community. I think there are people doing all sorts of interesting. Not that schemas and frameworks aren't interesting, but there are people doing a whole variety of things and working in a whole variety of different ways. I was lucky. You listed that list of schemes, and one of the best things about being involved in those things was obviously getting the music played by these wonderful orchestras and players. But the other thing was sort of chatting to the other composers who we all know this. Every composer's got a slightly individual, different approach, something that they bring to the table. They might just say something to you that you hadn't thought of, and I hadn't thought of that. That's changed my opinion on this. And they might say, "I'll go and listen to this piece." It's a much more. It felt like a much more welcoming environment, perhaps, than I had to admit, I was slightly, before doing it, I was slightly intimidated by the idea myself. Is this for me? Am I really this? Am I really up to this? Am I? Have I got the chops for this, etc.? All those. We all do it. The self-doubt questions. It's like, imposter syndrome and all the rest of it. Can I hack this? This isn't for me. This is for the clever kids. This I just shouldn't be doing this. So, if you are sort of thinking about it, and I'm sort of saying this, I'm thinking about your listening audience in mind. So do go and have a chat with someone, and don't necessarily rule it out because you think, it's not for me.
Yeah, I think that goes for making music in general. That's a question I'll pose a little bit later about what you were just starting to open up in thematics. But let's go back a little bit and say and ask, how did you know you wanted to be a musician in the first place?
That's a great question. I'm not entirely sure that I would ever have said that I decided, right, I'm going to be a musician. I did not grow up in a musical household. We were really lucky to have a piano, and my poor mother. We lived in the council of Rochdale, which is like a not particularly affluent town in the north of England. But one of the things that we were so lucky to have was a properly funded council music service. So I got my hands on things like a trumpet, a trombone, you name it, as many brass instruments as you can shake a stick at. I played a little bit of the drums. I was playing, classical and a bit of jazz piano. I'm not a great jazz pianist, but I can sort of get round enough. And sort of, my poor mother at one stage was, I think, driving me to a different type of rehearsal almost every night, and there wasn't really a light bulb moment that said, right, I want to be a musician. Except I made the decision I wanted to study A-level music, and I remember I used to get on the bus to Bury, which is not particularly close. I used to get up crack of dawn in the morning and take the bus to this sixth form college, and they had a great A-level music course. And then there was a composer, Camden Reeves, he's called. He still teaches at the RNCM. I actually met him after a long period of not being in his orbit, because I'd moved and all the rest of it. And he came in to do an education project with us. And it was with the Halley Orchestra, which is Manchester's orchestra. Go and check them out. They're amazing when they're allowed back. I'm not sure they're allowed back yet. And we wrote a piece for one of the players for the Halley Orchestra. And I played piano with that, and I sort of got to play with one of the Halley Orchestra members. Now, no one's ever going to book me to do an orchestral piano gig, but that was a sort of amazing experience. And I thought, yeah, I quite fancy this. I quite fancy the idea of being a composer. I would say sort of music was always this amazing part of my life. And I wouldn't say that I grew up even knowing what a musician's career would be, though. Like I'm still making it up as I go along. I don't know really. Maybe if there was a light bulb moment, it was probably that one. It was probably sort of being on stage at the Bridgewater Hall, sort of, playing my own music and thinking, yeah, this is cool.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
We were so lucky. Like, I was so lucky to get given these experiences, and you sort of, and this is why it sort of really gets me down when I see local music services being cut, because it's kids like me that lose out when we strip this stuff back. It's, if you're in a musical family or you've got loads of cash flying about, it's great. That's great, and that's great, and we've got, that's absolutely fine, and that's all brilliant. But I really like the idea that there's the talent can be talent and interest can be anywhere. Yeah. So I think I'm sort of quite, as I say, it does tend to get me down when you say, oh, they've stripped the budget back again for local authority music lessons and that sort of thing. Anyway, that was a really long answer to your question. Sorry.
No, it's it's relevant. All of that's relevant. Can't really imagine what it must be like to play your own music with like a professional musician in that way. It was
cool. I mean, I was about 16, 17, and it was the first time I'd really sort of, been with a proper pro. I was really nervous. I still get nervous when I play. But yeah, it was really nerve-wracking, but it was amazing, and it left an impression. And obviously, you then start listening to orchestral music and all that sort of stuff, and you think, wow, this is mega. Wouldn't it be cool to actually do this?
Yeah, and this ties into my next question, which is, how did you get where you are today? And I also thought I should mention that you're also doing games and films, and you mentioned writing for the theatre as well.
Yeah, so as I said, I spent a long time. My master's was actually in composing for the theatre. I have a real love of theatre as well as music. I have a real love of drama, and I got an opportunity to go and work in the theatre. When I was doing my master's, a guy called fantastic. Crazy. He's brilliant. He's a wonderful man. Australian pianist and composer. Now he is a jazz pianist. When I say I can play a little bit of jazz piano, it's because you see Warren Wills sit down at a piano and you think, all right, I can play a bit. He is mega. I think he's still in London. I'm not sure. In fact, you know what? I'm going to look him up. And he gave me my first sort of big job, which was music director for a production at the Royal Shakespeare Company of the Penelopiad, which is a Margaret Atwood book. And to be honest, that gig was above me at the time. Like, that was super stressful. It was sort of my first big job, and it was a lot. It was a big project, and I was pretty nervous and didn't really know what I was doing properly, and probably made all sorts of horrendous mistakes, which everyone was gracious enough to forgive me for. And got invited back there several times, and just I really liked writing music for the theatre and sort of arranging other people's music, and I sort of carved out a little bit of a funny niche, helping composers who weren't necessarily. There are a lot of composers, and this happens in gaming actually. There are a lot of composers who don't necessarily use notation. So they might have started as sound designers and whatever, and then developed a relationship with the director, and then suddenly they're asked to write music, and they want to use live musicians, and the musicians have obviously got to read something because it's a production, and that. So I did a lot of filling in those gaps, sort of assisting, supervising, directing. A little bit of everything, really. It was great fun. I really, really enjoyed it, and then decided I wanted to write. Came back to this. Well, wouldn't it be cool to do my own music? Did that at the same time as doing sort of concert music, because concert music's great and it's really, really enjoyable. But I also have this second interest. So during my PhD, I spent a long time teaching myself music technology, sampling, production, how to produce a convincing orchestral mock-up, all that sort of stuff, which as we all know, I think, having looked at your listeners, a lot of the Music Weekly's challenge, it does involve mocking the thing up, producing the thing. If you're working in any sort of applied music field, you are required these days to deliver the whole thing. So that took me a long time. I made a sort of fairly serious study of. I taught myself Max MSP from the big black book, and I learned all about Nyquist and all that sort of stuff, which I think I've probably completely forgotten now. But it was an amazing learning experience, and I don't ever use Max MSP these days because it's time is short. But that was an amazing learning experience. So then, it's film and game is relatively recent for me. I've been doing that a couple of years now. It sort of, because I'd sort of mainly worked in the live arts, I was sort of you just need to acquire a new skill set, which is mocking up production. How do you use a synthesizer? I was sort of I got Omnisphere and I was like, okay. And I was a real preset guy. I was like, okay, like actually, like seriously, if you'd have asked me 8 years ago, I didn't really know what an ADSR curve was, and so you've got it's just a new area of learning and knowledge. So I spent a long time doing that. I feel like I've got to a stage now where I'm sort of happy enough with that with my sort of mock-up sort of chops and all that sort of stuff. I mean, you never show me anyone who's satisfied with an orchestral mock-up, and there isn't anyone else.
It's super difficult, because I have listened to some of your things that I presume you wrote in a DAW as well. The one that you just put on Twitter that I commented on earlier today.
Oh yeah. That's a really cool project that I'm not allowed to talk about. It's super frustrating.
That's all right, but you use Spitfire for that. I saw Spitfire Audio.
I did.
But the thing that I find is that it's all the orchestra libraries are so underwhelming if you don't put in tons of time and just riding the mod wheel and doing dynamics. And it's like a crazy skill set. I also have this like a sort of a music education where we were taught composing, but on paper. So we didn't have to deal with any of that. Just we actually did use a DAW in 1997. But it was mainly just to type in all the notes and print out the note sheets or the scores. And we would then sit and put in like piano, fortissimo, crescendo, blah, 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 never thinking about whether it sounded realistic. And these days we have to learn that skill set too. And I'm a singer. I don't, I have very little insight into what, and apart from going to the orchestra, it's hard. It's as you say, it's a massive skill set to pick up compared to composing on paper, which is its own skill set, of course. But yeah, I can very much relate. And it's a steep learning curve once you start.
It's almost like you feel you're climbing Everest, and then you think, I've got so far, and then you'll listen to. In fact, this is great. John Powell, the film composer, he's got a YouTube channel, and he's been good enough to put some of his mock-ups, and he does this brilliant thing where he crossfades his mock-up, to the real session.
Oh.
It's really cool. It's really worth a listen. Now, I assume, I don't know, I'm not entirely sure, but I assume John Powell has got a team of people that do his mocking up for them. I'm assuming there's people that spend, a significant amount of time making that mock up as realistic as possible. But I've got to do it myself. So, having played things like brass instruments, I mean, I've never played a woodwind instrument, but it's the same principle. You blow down it, I think, I've just annoyed all the woodwind players. I'm sorry, woodwind players. Please don't at me on Twitter. I apologize. So so having done that, having actually played is super, super useful. And so I play when there's time. There's not always time, and it also depends on the library. So with that thing that you were talking about, that's I sold a kidney and got the Berlin Brass recently. Oh. I know, right? But you can't. I find myself actually drawing that stuff in rather than playing it. Whereas I've got a solo string library. In fact, I was just doing some recording this morning. I'm doing a mock-up of a piano quintet thing. And I am recording. So what I do is I often work with notation first and write the piece, and then go to the DAW and mock it up, and play in the parts myself. My piano playing's all right, and then I use a breath controller and the mod wheel, and after the fact drawing in to try and make the string parts as convincing as possible. But it really is just a question of time. It is unbelievably time consuming to produce anything that's sort of even slightly convincing. So what sometimes, and I know what I've started doing a little bit. In fact, what I'm doing, I'm working on my sort of first relatively big feature film, and that's what this project that I'm not allowed to talk about. And I'm finding that I'm sort of starting with the DAW, because the mock-up has to be convincing. And it's all very well. We're not entirely sure how much of it is going to be live, how much of it is going to be sampled. So I'm sort of working on the principle that you've got to have a mock-up that's ready to go. Great. Listen, if we can go and record the strings and the brass live, wicked. That's going to be fantastic. But I'm not sure what's going to happen yet. The whole world is in a peculiar situation for a start, and everything's been affected. So I always love, wherever possible, I love working with live players. And if I can do a bit of a soapbox thing, if you can get a good live player on anything you're doing, they will just elevate the whole thing to a level you just not thought possible. I'm a really huge advocate of working with musicians and live musicians. Do it as much as possible, do it as often as possible. Go to gigs, go to concerts, listen to these people make the music in the way that they make, because they're amazing. They're like players and performers. They're just like this gift that is given to us. They just elevate our music to the next level. And I anytime I ever get I've been really, really lucky with some of the orchestras and chamber groups that I've sort of got to work with. And every time I come away from working with players, even if it's in sort of first rehearsals where it can all feel a bit, maybe that's my fault, maybe I've written that really badly, maybe they just need to practice it. Even then, there's a sort of joy that comes from working with these live players and singers as well.
Yeah, I actually just had that experience because I, together with Andrew McGee, who's also in Music Weeklies, like the admin team, we wrote a song last year, and this year we decided to make it into quite a pandemic collab. So we got together, all in all, I think we're 19 musicians who have played parts of this song. We had like everyone signed up, like 10 guitarists and things like that, but we could, push them around, and most people played more than one instrument and stuff. But then I started getting the audio back to me that someone had recorded in Australia and in Mexico. And it was just, I almost cried every time I opened up that project. It was like nothing else to hear someone else perform what I'd written. And yeah, it's an immense experience. I would love to have some, nice pro. I mean, some of those people in the project were pros or are pros. So it's very gratifying, and
it never gets old. It never gets old. It's just amazing. It's just, and it can be a student player sometimes who just happens to capture, it doesn't necessarily need to be a top of the tree pro. Some of the students I've been lucky enough to work with knocked my socks off because they just find things in the music that you don't necessarily imagine are always there or haven't perceived, or they might say, oh, how about doing it like this? And that's what I love when that happens, and it's a genuine moment of, oh yeah, try it like that. That's I know some composers probably hate that idea, but I love that when the player finds something in the music that you weren't necessarily sure was there. That is I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, and I was feeling that was what was happening all over the place when I heard my song played back to me by someone else.
Was it not a nightmare? Was it not a nightmare though to get all these rooms to sound? Because if someone's recording in a bathroom somewhere and then someone else is recording, in their broom cupboard and whatever, it's all a nightmare, isn't it?
Well, actually, it was pretty good. We had, I don't know if people mainly maybe use dynamic mics or just really did take precautions, because it generally didn't have much boxiness or much room acoustics. So that was great. And it was
great.
Very, very
well,
fun.
That's good to hear. I look forward to hearing it.
Oh yeah, well it's now in mixing, so we'll see what happens with it if we are going to release it at some point. Stay tuned. But so how did you get from the classical world into doing the film and games composing then? Because that's a little bit of I know we already briefly touched on this previously, that it's when you come from a classical world, like I do myself as well, it's kind of this is the right way. And I'm not saying that there is a right way or a wrong way, but that's how it was presented to me in my education, that this is the only option, sort of. And
yes, yeah, okay, yeah, and this is a thorny, can be a thorny subject, and everyone has a different opinion. I would say attitudes and opinions are changing. So, I also don't think it's fair to say there is an old guard that thinks all this stuff is rubbish, and there's a newer guard. I don't think that's fair at all. I mean, if you look at, I was thinking today of like someone like if you look at orchestrator and conductor, superstar orchestrator and conductor Chris Austin, he's worth a follow on Twitter, because his taste is, he's one of these guys with a sort of encyclopedic knowledge of what seems like all of music. He's well worth, and he posts all this really fascinating music from all sorts of different areas all the time. I think he won a Tony Award for an orchestration of, oh my God, I've forgotten, he's going to kill me. You can find it. You can find out. So there is stylistic plurality. Yeah, I think given that I started from a dramatic music background, shall we say, so music that was used for things. Applied music? I've heard the term applied music. Terminology is always difficult, but let's go with that for now. Applied music is, and that's sort of where I started. So that was, I was writing music that was needed for things. And then I sort of went into composing concert music after that, almost. Not quite. I mean, I always was writing my own little things in my own free time, but not with that sort of extensive focus on it. So in a way, I sort of feel like I personally have always spun these two plates of here's concert music over here, and this is something I do with this hat on, and then here's the thing I do over here with a different hat. And the late great Morricone obviously passed relatively recently, and I sort of, that approach, it was a huge inspiration to me, because you are right. It's not necessarily what people expect. I think you don't necessarily expect to encounter someone who does perhaps the two things, as it were. Maybe that's not so common, but I don't see any reason that can't become more normal. I try not to overanalyze it or pigeonhole myself or limit myself. I follow my nose with where the opportunities come up and things that I think I might be interested in. I've got an incredibly eclectic taste in music myself, so it's never ever been a problem. As I say, I didn't grow up sort of in a musical family, or classical music is the only way, or jazz music is the only way, or theatre music is the only way, or you will only be a computer games composer, whatever. There was no one's ever really told me you can't do X, Y, or Z. So I just do what I want, and what I can find, what helps me earn a living, what I think are interesting projects. I try not to worry too much about it. And I would sort of urge younger composers, if you want to be exclusively a classical composer, or a video games composer, or a film composer, or whatever, that is absolutely fine. You can absolutely do that, and that's a perfectly valid strategy. I think this I will do all of the things that I'm interested in is also a different way to be, and I'm gonna keep trying.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think maybe as an artist, we develop with taking on new types of music as well, and tackling different styles or different genres, and not just always staying with the same thing. And for me, I'm a singer, so I tried to be a songwriter for the longest time, and I just got stuck in this whole thing. I have to involve my instrument type thing. But then when I tried something else, I realized that, there's a whole world that I'm urging myself to explore. It's so, it feels incredible that we have all this space to compose in. And there are no limit. I mean, I think maybe don't put limits on your own creativity. If you want to go and, if you're a singer and you think, I'd quite like to work with electronics, do that. See if that works for you. If you want to be the classic, I'm going to strum a guitar or play the piano and be that sort of singer-songwriter, great. That if that works for you, maybe it works for you sometimes. Maybe you want to diversify and you want to think about including electronics in your work, or writing music for vocal ensembles, whatever. Resist pigeonholing, unless
unless you sort of think, yeah, this is the only thing that I ever want to do, and this is how I want to carry on and I want to be, and I'm happy here. I would never ever attack anyone or accuse anyone of limiting themselves in that respect. I think both modes are perfectly valid, and one can be an artist and develop as an artist in both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go over to more concretely how you work, maybe.
Sure.
Would you like to walk us through your creative process on a typical project for you?
Okay. Well, it depends. I mean, I work on... So, let's say... I don't know whether to talk about the film I'm currently working on, maybe. Maybe that might be... As I say, so I sort of tend to start with notation. I feel comfortable with notation, and in fact, I think I stuck my neck out the other day and said I would urge all composers to learn notation, even if they don't end up using it. That's why do I think that? I think because, as I say, if you want something to be played by another instrumentalist or a group of instrumentalists, I think it's useful. Having said that, I got shot down for that opinion, because then there were loads of composers that said to me, Mike, I've not used notation in years. I have an orchestrator that worries about that for me. I compose in the DAW. I'm so great with piano roll now that it just and actually piano roll is great. And I've started with the film. I'm using, because I'm composing. I am actually. I changed my process, as I say, because we don't know whether or how much we're going to record live. So I am writing to make the mock-up as though that were going to be the final product. So I really need the mock-up to be good. So if it's all very well saying, oh, well, that library doesn't pull off that sort of musical material particularly well, but it'll be all right in the studio. Well, I can't do that in this particular instance, because it ain't going to work like that. I don't have that luxury. So I am writing. I am working in the DAW, but I've gotten very used to piano roll. Which is a form of musical notation, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, and arguably in the DAW, it carries more information. You know, I've got 7 lanes of automation underneath the note information itself, and arguably that carries more data than just the notes themselves. You know, okay, given that there's articulation there and whatnot, but anyway, so I start with notation normally because I just feel it's so quick for me to get my ideas down. So actually, this is what I would urge any composer trying to find their process. Something that works for a different composer, and you think, oh, great, right, X, Y, and Z, they're amazing. They work like this. I've got to do it like that. You might find, actually, you know, I prefer working in notation, or I prefer working in piano roll, or some other whatever, you know, whatever works for you, however you can get your ideas down fast and consistently without sort of, you know, it getting to 11:30 at night and you're sort of sobbing away because you've got this great idea and you can't get it down. Who cares? Who cares how you get the idea from there into the real world? I don't care. So long as you can get it out there in some form, I think that's absolutely fine. Anyway, I prefer to write in notation because I'm fast. I moved over from Sibelius to Dorico about a couple of years ago, and it's just so fast. I was pretty fast in Sibelius, but Dorico is almost like it's like a typewriter for music. It's like a word processor for music. it's so quick. I sometimes work with when I'm sat at the piano. I sometimes work with good old fashioned pencil and paper, and when I'm out and about and inspiration strikes, which it doesn't happen that often these days, to be honest, because I'm normally walking from somewhere to somewhere. But I always do keep a bit of manuscript and a pencil in my bag, because you never know. And it has happened. I have got a couple of good ideas. And I also have a little a voice record app on my phone, and that's brilliant. So I tend to sit at the piano a lot and improvise as sort of an ideas generator first, and then I just record my noodlings into the voice memo recorder thing. That then gets uploaded to Dropbox, and I can ping that right into my DAW, so I can have that as a reference, and then I'll either notate what I've scribbled or improvised at the piano. And then, so I always, unless I'm working on and then you said I was working on a film before I started this other project. I was working on another feature that's been sort of paused by Corona, but they wanted a very, very textural sort of soundtrack. Think sort of along the lines. Did you see Chernobyl?
No.
Hilda Gunnardotter, I probably mispronounced that. It's an incredible score. There's loads of stuff about it on the web. She went down to this power plant in Estonia to like record a load of source material.
Is that a recent film?
It's a TV series.
Yeah, she was interviewed at Bilarm in Oslo in February, and I saw her interview.
Right.
Very fascinating composer. Yeah. Amazing,
absolutely amazing. This soundtrack, it just knocked my socks off. I couldn't get enough of it. I had it on a loop for about a week. It was mega. So they wanted something vaguely in that universe. So the process changed again for that, because obviously there's no notation with that. That's more soundscape type stuff. So again, that was straight into the DAW. So when I'm working on filmic stuff, because people tend to, I think, given that I've got a fairly sort of contemporary classical background, people tend to want me for slightly different things, maybe. Again, I don't want to pigeonhole myself. It's way too early for that. But so with that process, that started with bringing raw sounds into the DAW and seeing how I could play with those. So that was a very organic process that happened in the DAW as opposed to on the page. Now, having said that, this morning I was working on a production album for a music library that I work with, and they're wanting things for strings and piano. So that's a strings and piano album. So I would say that was much more my normal process. So I sat down at the piano, improvised the thing, played the riff, did the thing with the piano, recorded it, took it downstairs, played it back, notated it. I've just finished doing a separate mock-up now where I play everything in myself. It's quite time consuming, but it does help your helps your alto clef reading if your alto clef reading is weak. Mine is. I just still suck. Because I've never really had to sort of use it in anger. I can read it, to write down. But then when the notes are coming quickly one after another, you find, oh wait, I'm actually not as good at reading this clef as I thought I was. So I do record everything then into the DAW. As I say, I've got a breath controller and it's a brilliant app. I have an iPad and I have something called Composer Tools Pro. I can probably find a link to that. And it's amazing. I think it runs on Lima, and it takes a lot of setting up, but then you can control several parameters all at once. But by sliding your fingers, and I'm looking down because I'm doing it as I'm talking to you. You can sort of control various parameters, and then you can articulation switch and know which articulation you're going to switch to because you've labeled it. As I say, it takes a hell of a lot of setting up, but I find key switching horrific. But I also don't like separate lanes for articulations. It's probably getting a bit inside baseball now, I assume. But if I'm
That's
getting
fine.
fine, okay. Yeah, so I don't really like working with individual articulation lanes because I just don't like it. I work in Cubase and I like articulation switching. I like it all to be there on one track. It's just a personal preference. I know loads of fantastic composers who prefer the different way of working. It's whatever suits you really. So yeah, I would say normal process, but I'm still not working that out. I'd say I've got about 3-4 different processes that I use dependent on the project. And I think that's probably, if I were going to give advice, I would say work out what the project needs to be. What are you doing? Are you working in this way? Are you working, is the end result going to be this sort of project? Is the end result going to be this sort of project? And then find the right process for the project.
Oh, that sounds good. It's good to be open to where the project takes you, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now I appreciate that some people could probably feel a little bit lost with that, but I suppose that's the advantage of having worn so many different hats. I'm sort of relatively unfazed by jumping into Cubase or Ableton or whatever and doing some sound design, and I don't mind notating either. It's all fine. It's taken a long time to get to this point. It doesn't happen overnight, and I think again, I wouldn't presume to give anyone advice, but if I were going to impart any tips, I would say just the process is going to it might take a long time to get to where you think you're going, and just that's cool, that's fine. It's not a race. I sort of think sometimes we can feel like you've got to get to the finish line of this thing, and I think just work it out as you go along. Enjoy what it is you're doing as you do it, because we're not all getting paid millions and millions of dollars to do super big budget films and whatnot. So just enjoy the process of creating music and finding out about yourself and what your process might be along the way. Ask questions of yourself all the time. How can I work in a different way to try and generate a different end result this time? And I think sometimes working with directors can be great for that, because they'll sort of say, yeah, don't do what you did on that last project. I really liked that. And you think, well, why have you hired them? Because they want a different thing from you. Or maybe sometimes working with a different musician can give you a different insight or a different way of thinking about things. Or you might listen to some different music or whatever. I'm a big believer in not sort of settling into a groove. But again, I'm not criticizing anyone who's got a groove and they're happy there, but I quite like what it is I'm doing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to remember to be free in the process, kind of, because I tend to settle into my normal go-to procedures. But yeah, it's also when I explore ways to do things that I come up with new stuff, I guess. So it is important to... Yeah,
it's a balance, and I would say, and also when you're under time pressure, which we often are, it's really, really good to have one or two processes that just work. When you're under the cosh, and it's great to have the luxury of time, but let's be honest, we don't always have it. So when you are under that, we need it now, Mike. We need it. Okay, great. It's nice to know that you can get it done quickly. So again, for all that I'm saying, always be free to explore. Well, let's be realistic. Sometimes you're not going to have the time to explore, and at that point, it's good to have a solid process that you can go to when you're panicking a bit.
Yeah, definitely. But what would you say are your main sources of inspiration if you say you're composing for a project that's, I don't know, whatever. This may be different if it's for a film or for a game or for a concert project. I don't know. Do you have like maybe something you do, or a composer that you look to, or?
Oh, loads, and it changes. It changes every month. There's someone who I sort of get a little bit obsessed with. For one reason or another, I'm going through a huge John Powell phase at the minute. I'm just going over all of his orchestrations, and I'm sort of you know, he's the sort of flavour of the month this month. But last month it was Hilda Gunnar, and it sort of it can and does change sort of dependent on where I am. Although I do tend to get hired and booked for the slightly more esoteric things. So I do like the slightly more left field of things. So yeah, composers like Johan Johansson. I mean, I still talk about his score to Arrival because it knocked my socks off. I don't. Do you know it?
No, I don't know that one. No.
Oh, as a singer, as a singer, you might really enjoy that one because it really features really inventive use of the voice. I think he was listening to Joan the Barber as well quite a lot, and that again, I find that really, really inspirational. So sort of he was creating this score sort of all about language, and then decided to use a choir and play with sort of breaking down words and all that sort of stuff, and that he sort of turned to contemporary classical music for inspiration. And I've obviously listened to a lot of contemporary classical music, and that's something that is always sort of there, present in my work. I think at some level, whether that be okay, well, it's just quite dexterous orchestration, or, oh, this is a technique that you might not necessarily have expected. I mean, obviously, contemporary classical doesn't have a monopoly on interesting and inventive ways of using instruments and electronics. Of course it doesn't. So I try and listen to did you catch, you seen that TV series Dark?
No, I haven't watched much TV lately, but I'm sure some of our viewers have.
Right. Well, that Ben Frost did the score for that, and that was absolutely incredible. That sort of knocked my socks off as well. And sort of, I try and keep electronics as a part of my work as well as much as I can, because I think it's just if you're sort of working on your own in a studio, I think it's a great way of being able to elevate your production values. We can't always afford to hire crack musicians or soloists or whatever. So I really like using electronics and soundscapes and those sorts of things, because you can deliver really high quality results without necessarily needing loads of expensive kit. So yeah, my inspiration really does come from all over the place, and I try and take it from wherever I can find it. It might be and also I try and take in other art forms as well. So I try and go to exhibitions and watch, look at visual art and paintings and those sorts of things. I think inspiration can be found in a lot of ways. I really like that bleed in. I try to do that. I don't do it as much as possible, as much as I used to. I've got a small child, and time is incredibly short these days. So one needs to be realistic. But I try and keep an open mind and find inspiration from wherever I find it. I really like, one of the things I really like is there's a really nice little fashion for people to post little clips of what they're doing on Twitter. So they might have, oh look, today I'm using an empty oil drum I put a contact mic on an oil drum, and I'm banging it with a rubber chicken. And you think, okay, great, why not? And I really like that, because people are so inventive. People in our industry and this craft are so relentlessly inventive. So I really like that as well. I try not to do too much scrolling on Twitter. I sort of tend to jump on, say what I've got to say, and then log off, because you can find yourself doom scrolling a little bit, can't you?
Absolutely. Definitely know that one. Well,
we actually have a few questions from the community that I wanted to ask you. And most or all of our interviewees are going to be asked these questions. So let's start with, what's the best advice you have for people who want to break into your field? If you can choose one or a couple.
I would say skills development is never wasted time. So be good. Be the best. Work on the craft. Everything else sort of can feel outside of your control at times. Are you going to get hired? Are you going to get that job? Is someone else going to get the job? Are you up? Are you down? Are you in fashion? Are you out of fashion? The music is the craft is there, and you can always work. You can always find something to develop the craft.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's an important one. And then another one that's important is, how do you deal with imposter syndrome and or potential burnout?
Well, yeah, they're two very, very tricky things. Imposter syndrome never fully goes away. You just need to learn to kick it into a drawer. I suffer with it less these days than I used to. It put me off for a long time. I sort of, as I said, I sort of thought, oh, composing concert music isn't for the likes of me, and I sort of thought that for a long time, if I'm honest. And maybe I should have grasped that nettle a little bit earlier, but anyway, no matter. Yeah, it's hard. We all feel it, and especially I think when you're a beginning composer, because actually the stuff might not be all that good yet. You might actually be working on material that is eventually going to be good. You're to go back to my first answer, you're honing your craft at this point. So if you're sort of a beginning composer, I'm rubbish at this. That this is, I did this track and I don't like it. It sucks compared to this. Comparison is the thief of joy anyway. But so don't compare yourself too much to other people. It's inevitable. You're going to. We all do. I do. But try not to let it put you off doing things, and then get back on the horse the next day and try and make something better than what you made yesterday. Go to one or two, maybe three people that you can trust that will give you feedback and say, yeah, it's all right. Here's how you could make it better, maybe. Or, yeah, chuck this one in the bin and move on to something else. And then just keep moving on, because you'll find that as you do it more, maybe the analogy might be like a muscle. As you lift a heavier and heavier weight, you get stronger and stronger. And as you listen to more music and you take in more stuff, you'll find that muscle develops, maybe. Burnout was the other thing you asked me about. Yeah, burnout's really hard. Sometimes you've just got to do the work, and it's really, really tricky. I have started taking Sundays off, which means no social media, no. It's easier. It's actually easier having a child, because you're forced to stop doing things. You have to go and you literally have to go and stop the small person from putting their fingers in the electricity socket, and you actually physically have to go and do it. So that's good in a way, because it switches your brain onto other things. Try and take a day away from all of these distractions and the screens and the relentlessness, because it can sort of sometimes feel like, when you look at this, God, everyone's hustling all the time. And then you break it down and you look at individuals, and actually no one's hustling all the time. I don't think, maybe there are some people that are hustling all the time, but I don't. I haven't got the energy for it. And then you can be overwhelmed by that, and you can feel like everyone's doing it all the time, and it's not the case. So give yourself a break, give yourself a day off.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's important. Just take a weekend. there's a reason we have 5-day work weeks, right?
Right, and that actually moving to Scandinavia has sort of helped with that, because the
Yeah.
the work culture is very healthy in that respect, and your health. Once your health is gone, it never comes back. You need to be really careful with your health. Prioritize your own well-being, because nobody else is going to do it for you. Everyone will take the work. They'll take as much of you as you're prepared to give. Look after yourself.
Yeah, that's good advice. Okay, so we have a few one-liners, more or less.
Yeah, I'll try and be short.
And
Sorry,
here-
I tend to waffle.
Well, it's how much time you have, but anyways, these are quite quick, I think. So, given the choice, door, paper, inside head, or on instrument?
We've been over that. One line. Okay, so gun to my head, paper.
Okay. What one thing would you like to experiment more with?
More computer games.
Okay. Which music trend peeves you the most?
No, this is it's designed to get me in trouble. Which music trend peeves me the most? Oh, I'm going to annoy so many people. The ukulele. The ukulele. I'm sorry for anyone I've offended. You know what I mean, though, don't you?
Right.
The ukulele and the shakers. I'm over it. I'm sorry.
Just add bare feet.
Not mine.
No,
You don't
no,
want to see
no,
it.
I didn't say
Nobody
that.
needs that. Nobody needs that in their life.
And lastly, music guilty pleasure.
Oh my! No one's no. I have a running playlist, and it is awful, and no one's. I'm taking that to my grave. No. It's that Spotify playlist is between me and Spotify. So actually, I'm trying to get away from Spotify. Actually, that's a whole another conversation we could have had. I have some absolutely. People who know me would not believe the level of cheese that is on my running playlist. I need motivational stuff. Yeah, I'm a guilty pleasure is probably 80s soft rock.
Oh, nice.
That's pretty bad, isn't it? That is pretty bad.
Yeah, I won't
Yeah,
ask for details.
you won't judge, except I
lived
can
in
see you
80s
judging,
soft
right?
rock.
I can feel everyone judging me. I can feel it. Go ahead, it's fine.
Oh yeah, well, nothing was better for slow dancing than 80s soft rock, no?
No comment.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, that was what I had. We also talked about you finding some music pieces that you wanted to point our viewers or listeners to. If you have some pieces that you would like to highlight, just by name.
Yeah, sure. I will. I think you said you were going to pop up a SoundCloud link. So I have two as one might expect. I'm just looking at it now. I have two main sort of playlists. If you go to my SoundCloud profile, there's a sort of film, game, and theatre music playlist, and then there's a concert music playlist. So I would say, whichever, pick your poison. Just go and have a quick scroll through both of those, see if anything takes your fancy, rather than any specific piece.
Yeah. Sorry.
We got away with that.
Yeah.
We
We'll
got away
leave
with
some
that.
links in there, and we'll let people have a look.
Great.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
It
and
was
thanks for
lovely to talk to you.
and you. And if you made it this far, well done. Thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you, guys.
All right.
All right. Well, I hope you tune in for the next interview of this anniversary series, and thank you for listening.